Hello boys and girls, today we're gonna build a simple application that use sockets, GraphQL, encryption, and extracting some system information. The schema we'll be working with consists two code bases. One is the client and another one is the server. We will create bidirectional communication, meaning that this part will send queries and this part will reply to those queries. The whole communication here will be done with TCP, with sockets, and in particular a TCP socket, meaning that it will have a client IP address here, we'll have a server IP address here, and ports. What we're gonna request the server to do? I'm thinking of building a server that extracts some system information. Imagine that this client is, let's say, part of a monitoring tool. Monitoring, and this is instance somewhere, and we want to extract the current load. So we here want to have the CPU load, and maybe later on we will have to extract additional information. So we have to have a universal way of being able to query from the client. We should be able to query the server and ask for this information. Server application should extract the information from the system and return back the response. Being that, let's say, critical, like it might have a valuable data, not just the current load, but might have some business critical data, we should encrypt this information here, the query, what we are asking for, and we should especially encrypt the response, the thing we are replying. But the way we unify the query would be by using GraphQL. So we will build the query here. We'll ensure that server understands GraphQL and resolves whatever we ask for, and extract the reply and send back the reply. So first we'll start with checking our Python version, and for this purpose we will use 3.7.4. Just make sure you're using some supported version and whichever you like and you are fine with, because we'll use multi-base functionality. It will work with any recent version. So the next step is to create that virtual environment we'll be using. I will use the module venv, and I'm gonna source it out. And I like to build those two applications being a command line ones. This will introduce some additional packages. I'll show a bit later. Meanwhile, I like to start with the server, just because when we're building the client, we'll have to have an entity that works, which we can test against, assuming that our server will work. So we'll start with importing socket server, and we'll subclass. We'll create, let's say, a class called server, which is subclass of socket server base request handler. Okay, so the only method that we need to have for now is the handle method. Oops. Okay, handle method. and it need to accept some data using the request attribute. So we'll just print the data. Let's say self request receive. By the way, it's the way of handling a simple socket server is well in the documentation of Python. So that's this is actually not the most important thing. Anyways, here we just set the receive buffer. I like to have a bigger buffer, even though this is not the default buffer. And if you exceed the buffer, it will chunk out the data you sent. It will crop it and send it piece by piece. For my application, because I will mainly work over it depends actually not on the schema, but maybe on the purpose. If you exchange small information, let's say like we do, we can make it very small, and that will be probably fine, because either way it will basically allocate more memory. So it's not too wise to create the buffer being huge. So yeah, more or less here is what we will have to receive. Let's have some arguments, like because it will be a command line application, we'll create the main part. And here it's pretty standard. We'll create some options. Let's make it a bit interesting. Let's have the config in a separate file, so we don't have to change our code all the time when the client or the server have to bind to a certain, like the server binds to a certain IP and port, but the client starts to send queries to a certain IP and port. So let's have that in a separate part, which we can read. So let's create for the parser. Here is, let's name it parser. It's oh, I didn't import it. Parse. So parse takes argument parser. Let's put a simple description. What would that be? Description. I'm gonna call it simple TCP socket server. Okay, now we're gonna add the arguments that our server application can take, and obviously, as we talked about now, this is the config. So hey parser, add argument that is called -- config, and have a destination, like an attributes which we can read. I'll call it CFG for short. It does not have a default value, and we should present some help text, like this should be the path to config file. We should not, I set the default to none just because we should not assume anything. Like following the base principles, everything should be explicitly said. Okay, now, oh, I made a mistake somewhere. Where is that? Add argument, we close here. Okay, this is good. Oh, okay, in the print. I didn't close the print. Nice, okay. Now, our arguments, let's call them arguments, is the object that our parser sends the parsed arguments, the parsed arguments. And might be a good idea to check if we pass the config. Might not be a good idea to proceed the processing. So as we mentioned here, the destination is CFG. So we check if our arguments CFG, if they're not available, if we don't have them, we should print some message which should say, let's say, missing config, right? That's accurate. Missing config. And we should exit, but we don't have the sys module imported. Import sys. So now we just exit. If we have them, we'll read them. Let's test it. Right, quit. So Python server py. It says missing config. Let's display the help information. Good. If we specify the config file, like let's have the file JSON, let's say, whatever, it doesn't do anything. That's cool. Now now let's check. Okay, now when we build the necessary information for such an application, the next step would be to, as we said, it's maybe good that this configuration file is in JSON. We should open that, and let's open simply the file. It's when we expect here in the CFG to have the full path of the file, we directly can use that string with the path in order to specify where the file is. So arguments CFG, we open to read it as JSON config. And we should be able to load it, but we are missing the JSON module or JSON. And we just say our config is loaded from the file from JSON config. Now we have the configuration, right? Okay, we should be able to use that, and let's test it. Like when JSON loads the config, this config here should be a dictionary, so we'll be able to call, let's say, the first should be host and the second one port. So config get host. Let's put it in f string because it's more convenient. Okay, and we'll have config get port. That's accurate. Config get host, config get port. Oh. No, it's not accurate. Made a mistake somewhere. Config. Oh, All right. That's not necessary to be in the context. That's okay to be gotten like that. Maybe this part. Insert. Or didn't close something again. All right. Yeah. I made a mistake with strings. I should make a habit of it to use double quotes for everything anyways. So very nice practice. So let's create the JSON file, config JSON, and that should be in this format. So host will be my loopback address, and the port would be some port like 8912. So now if we test Python server py and we specify the config, which would be config JSON. Here we go. We're ready with reading the configuration.